So for session two, I'm gonna talk about how I think about Pokemon 5 and 6, how I think about data analysis, and in that same vein, anti-meta team building. Then I'm gonna go into how to refine and how to test a team for tournaments or for best of one or for a variety of things. And then I'm gonna finish the last two by talking about how I think about piloting best of three versus best of one and how to think about leads. So that's gonna be what we're gonna do today. If there's anything else that I should talk about, that's totally fine. Just let me know. Um, Super duper helpful. Whatever helps you guys. So this is gonna be a lot, but 5 and 6 is about rounding out the team. And rounding out the team can mean like four different things. So it's fixing weaknesses, building an alternative mode, reinforcing strengths, and fitting playstyles. To talk about fixing weaknesses with the core four, um, there it's not usually that surprising to see that the team has like one or two struggle matchups, and that's not going to be usually against a singular Pokemon. Because if your team is struggling against specifically a single Pokemon and not a general strategy, the core four has not done its job. The core four should be able to beat pretty much anything in a 2-on-1, but if it's a certain strategy like redirection with a Charizard or just a Garchomp next to a Charizard because you just can't deal with that damage output, um this Pokemon is going to be trying to add to fix the last little bits of problems with this team. You got to be careful cuz you usually want this
It's
to
already.
be
I'm sorry.
uh what?
Hey guys, mute your stuff.
I'm sorry.
Um an important thing to do with this is you kind of want your weakness Pokemon to fit into one of these other three. Probably fitting play styles is going to be one of the most important things for it to fit alongside fixing weaknesses. But your Pokemon 5 and 6 want to accomplish all four of these things as much as possible. When and then we'll go into reinforcing strengths. Your core four usually has a centralized idea. It's gonna be like, oh, this is a trick room team. Oh, this goal is to try to do a ton of spread damage early and then finish stuff off later. There's a lot of things that can be your general strength, but there's usually a core idea within your core four. A big benefit is if you bring on a Pokemon that just makes that so much stronger. So like Big Six, um, in reinforcing strengths, it's about hitting hard with spread and then finishing stuff off with like really good finishing Pokemon. And if you consider their core to be like Floette and King Gambit and Whimsicott and Charizard, then Garchomp gives another spread attacker for the team that can be paired next to that Charizard. And then it also gives Basket Legion another really strong finishing mod. And that reinforces the team's strengths so much that just make it such a pain to ever beat those Pokemon. Um, and you just like you can't do anything into it just because there's too many ways for them to do the same idea. So even if it is the same general idea that people can predict, since there's enough different ways to go after it, there isn't a necessarily a single Pokemon that can quote unquote counter that strategy. The alternative way to take it, which I also like, is alternative modes. With the core four, your gameplay is going to be linear. That's just how it works. It'll have kind of one central Pokemon, one central idea that it's trying to do to win the game. So if you're finding that that mode is just really predictable and really easy to counter, bringing an alternative mode into the team makes it so that you can have significantly more flexibility. Um, And this just makes it really hard for an opponent to predict which of the strategies you're going for, especially if the alternative mode is a really popular one. It lets your regular be super strong. And like a lot of dual mega teams are a good example of alternative modes. They not only fix weaknesses with the base team, but they create an alternative mode. This is usually a Pokemon that you want to synergize really well with your third Pokemon because your third Pokemon is trying to counter some issues. So, like, let's say you have Garchomp as countering issues with the team, but you're still struggling with Charizard. Then adding a T-Tar that can just pair next to Garchomp so strongly and also helps remove that Charizard, that really fixes weaknesses and adds an alternative mode that they're really going to have to think about because T-Tar is just that much of a strength. And then arguably, in my opinion, the most important thing to a successful team is building your green zone. Your team may have gotten a little bit outside of your green zone with your core four. And your goal with these last two is you want to make this fit like as in the middle with your core four as you possibly can. Or else the team's just going to be uncomfortable. Um, but you'll play so much better when you're in your green zone and just fixing it up with your green zone. So like when you're looking at fixing weaknesses and reinforcing strengths in alternative modes, this isn't necessarily like you just put a Pokemon to fit a playstyle. It's you're looking for something else and you're making sure that those Pokemon can fit your playstyle. Because it's just going to make you so much more comfortably play with the team. Especially these Pokemon are reinforcing strengths and adding alternative modes and fixing weaknesses. So I wanted to specifically talk about a team that I think has maybe the best example of this I've ever seen. So if we go to, it was EUIC 2025. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. This is Wolf Glick's EUIC winning team. And this Pokemon, this team was really, really oppressive and really, really strong. And it did the 5 and 6 Pokemon more brilliantly than I've seen basically anybody do it before. So his core 4, if you've watched this video, you might have, it was Koraidon, Fluttermane, Incineroar, Amoonguss. They have so much synergy. It has so much offense, so much defense, scouting. It was just a really, really smart 4 Pokemon that he put together on this team. And these 4 beat almost everything. Except it struggled into stuff like the horses. That was one of the biggest struggles with the team. And a couple of other issues. And he fixed it by adding Perish Song. And this is such a big deal because as I was talking about earlier, you want to fix weaknesses. So his biggest weaknesses with the team were fixed by the existence of Perish Song. Not only does it reinforce his strengths because you have a photosynthesis user and another fake out user and a really defensive core that really plays into fitting his playstyles that allows for his strengths to be reinforced, but it almost reinforces his strength purely because of his alternative mode. He has an alternative mode that is Perish Song, and since Wolfie is so well known for his Perish Song, the amount of people that are scared to death by a Perish Song team are going to make them overcompensate to beat Perish Song. And that just makes the regular mode so much stronger. So the existence of it is reinforcing the strengths as an alternative mode that fits his playstyle perfectly and fixes the weaknesses with the team. And this core 4 was just so strong. He tested this core 4 to oblivion and it just was so strong. Watch his video if you haven't. It's one of my favorite videos. But then he 5 and 6 perfectly. It's one of the best built teams with this idea in mind. When you look at the finding the Pokemon to start a team, the perfect partner Pokemon, the fixer, and the glue, it's just such a beautiful team. There's a lot of ways that you could build these teams. So it's kind of up to the person. So if any of you guys have like a core 4 that you guys want me to go over, you can mention that and I'll talk about how I like to think about building that core 4 out. You guys got a core 4 that you want me to build around or no?
If nobody says anything, we could always just use the example from session 1
The example from session 1. Fair
and
enough.
then go from there.
So this was the team that I had in session 1. To be honest, I would have reset this team. I don't think this team was very good. Mousehold did not help as much as I thought it would. But one of the biggest weaknesses that I was dealing with on that team was just my lack of speed control and tailwind and a lack of a fighting resist and a ground resist. So the Pokemon that came to mind in that case was Dragonite with the multi-scale You could even run this with one of the Dragonitites. And then I would throw this in a calculator, obviously. You could run something like Heat Wave, Tailwind, Dragon Pulse, Protect, and then give it bulk. Or you could even run this thing rather than this. You can run it with something other than the Mega, and you can try it with like Extreme Speed. Um, and you could try Dragon Claw, and that's also going to be so strong offensively. And you could kind of just invest speed to necessary and have like a minimal attack stat of sorts. So that's an example of a fixer. If we run it with the Dragonite, it gives an alternative mode to this Metagross, and this Metagross struggles a lot into things like Charizard, and this Pokemon is going to be really strong into something like Charizard because it's just going to have no way to hit the Dragonite. And it really helps fix here, and it adds Tailwind for an alternative mode, and the playstyle of running a little bit of bulky offense alongside giving it speed control kind of fits all the things. Fitting playstyles is important. I'm still trying to perfect where my green zone is. I don't think I'd play this team as my green zone, but it does give a defensive backbone and some speed control, so it'd be kind of leaning more into that variant of sorts. And then the 6 Pokemon, what's an alternative mode that can be built with this team? We already have the Dragonite here. So what's a good pair with Dragonite that you can really sit next to this? Or just what's a good pair with this team in general? So I'm gonna kind of go to the idea of this team. The idea of this team is it's gonna get chip damage on singular things, and that's gonna be really, really bulky. Um, and be quite strong, but you obviously don't want to redo your weaknesses. So something that could be cool on this team is you could run like a Basculegion because he hits really, really, really hard, and can come in late game and do a lot of work. And you could run the Life Orb set, or this thing could run the Scarf variant. This is where testing becomes really, really important. Your last two you should test until it feels good, and your team should be like, for these first four, shouldn't win all your games, but you should feel comfortable playing it and like find a core idea into what you're struggling with and certain things that you specifically note are a struggle. And then these Pokemon need to fix that or help this Pokemon. But these two are really, really open ended. So it's really dependent on what you like to play with and what feels good. And a lot of other variants that's really, really important to make sure that that Pokemon works. So before you get into this 5 and 6, try to make sure these four, you like these four. It doesn't mean these four have to win. You just have to like how they play. And you have to win a little bit. But if you really like how it plays and you're winning a little bit, then you're going to be successful in these next two. But that's only if you start winning like a lot after you add the two. The first four should feel good. The 6 should feel great before you move on. There shouldn't be the he was feeling okay. It should be like, I love every single Pokemon on this team, and I could never see myself removing anything here. That's like the level of excitement you should have for your team and the strengths of your team and the roles of your team. They shouldn't overlap too much, and that'll help you build a really strong 5 and 6. But it's pretty open ended with your 5 and 6. So I'm just gonna jump to something because it's kind of nice for this 5 and 6. If you're lost, or if you're lost at any point, I'm gonna talk about analyzing data. This is what I do best. This is what I specialize in. Um, I like staring at stuff like Limitless, and I'm gonna find the best way to build something. So, if I'm going here, I'm going to tournaments, I'm going to online, and then I'm gonna go to complete, and this will help me look at some big tournaments. So, like, let's say this tournament, this is 300 players. Here's how I'm gonna break this down. I'm gonna start by going to metagame, and then I'm just gonna sort by win percentage, just to see if there's something that's like really out of the ordinary. I see Dragalge had a really successful team, so I might look into that later. If I wanted to build a team around that. This is kind of if you're struggling to find a Pokemon that you really want to build around, or if you're trying to build an anti-meta team. So you're trying to see, okay, well, what did this team do that made this so successful? So it's only one, which means you should take this with a grain of salt. But this is Mega Dragalge with Toxic and a super defensive Sinistra and Toxapex and Sunny Day Rain Dance Sableye to have so much damage output. So this is really a defensive team, like a heavily defensive team that we see here. And I just think it's fascinating, and you can even look at the matches and see what this team was winning against. So it lost to an Aggron team, but it's beating Big Six a lot of the times, which means this team could be a really good counter to Big Six, and looking into this team more could be fascinating just by its defensive capabilities. But if you're not necessarily doing that, you also might want to look at ways that the Pokemon that you want to play have been super successful. So I know we were talking about Staraptor with Inform earlier and how it's been successful. So I look at these top teams and I'm like, wow, Sand Staraptor teams are looking so strong right now. And they're running this Brave Bird Close Combat Tailwind set. And these are 1, 6, and 7 placement, which just shows you how offensive these things are. And this one was running a Brave Bird and Dual Wing Beat. So they weren't running any roost or anything. There's a roost on this one, so they all have a little bit of variance, but it seems really, really strong with Sand right now. So I'm going to keep that in mind if I want to build around it. Or we can look at a team like this, which is switching for Energy Ball to help beat Swampert matchups rather than Moonblast, which is a fascinating tech. And then this is a build around Staraptor, where they're running Delphox as their special, so it's kind of like a Big Six type of build. And they're running Big Six with Staraptor instead of running it with Floette. But they even have the Dazzling Gleam on Delphox, which is really cool.
That was actually pretty close to what we had for my first team almost.
Yeah,
That's
so
kind of crazy.
it's a thing. Taunt instead of Trick Room, Energy Ball instead of Moonblast, but the idea here is the same. The idea here is the same. It's a lot of these same ideas that we were building initially. So you don't necessarily have to copy it, but it's about understanding the Pokemon and what it's trying to do on these teams. If you understand what it's attempting to do, that'll help you build your own team because you're like, okay, this did get 8-3 and 19th. 10-2 and 11th. So this idea of running it in a Big Six type of build with the Brave Bird and the Close Combat and the Roost, this is a real thing. This isn't just me building a team. And you don't have to do this. If your team is feeling really good, this is obviously feeling really good. But if you're feeling like questionable about your team, it could be a good idea to look at some of these tournaments and see how they are using these Pokemon and to what success level they are. So it looks like there was only like out of the 25 players, respectfully, pretty much everybody sucked except these top 5. So what I'm seeing out of these top 5s is I am seeing Sand. Like I see Sand in the first 3. So Sand looks super duper strong. So I'd look into Sand Staraptor if I wanted to play that. It also looks like it has decent form with a Delphox Whimsicott core. This one seems like a more defensive build of it with an Incineroar and a Sinistra to help support the Delphox. But now this looks more like a true Big Six. I would probably switch Delphox for Charizard just because it's a better Big Six mon without the support. But if you want to go heavy on the support, the Sinistra and the Whimsicott on this team does a lot for that. It lets you click Nasty Plot. Psych Up. Wow. That is something. But there's usually cookage that you can find on a lot of these teams. And even this team down here, this was like it's like a Sunroom variant with Scrafty and Staraptor. I probably wouldn't build this. This team looks horrendously weak to Fairy. But it's an interesting idea. So that's how you build around like a Pokemon that you like. But if I'm looking at anti-meta, I'm looking at wow, Excadrill just did amazing this tournament. Or Milotic is looking really, really strong. Or Rotom Wash is looking really, really strong. So what's going on? Why are these Pokemon strong? And if you look at these teams that are successful, it's like, oh, this is like a speed control damage variant with citrus. It's just trying to sit there and get damage off. This one is a Will-O-Wisp support with leftovers, but it still has Hydro Pump leftovers. And it has the Levitate, so it can be really, really strong into the current format. Or this one's a T-Tar variant with Aggron, believe it or not, which is, one of the ones of all time, and it has Light Screen. So if you want to build anti-meta, it's a lot of building anti-meta can be used statistically, where you look at these teams and you go, okay, what is making these guys successful? And there's also a case to be made if something isn't looking so successful. Like let's go to the bottom here and see if there's anything with high play rate that just really sucked. Pelipper had a 41% win rate. And its best placement was 16, and then it went 31st. Looking at this, I don't think Rain looks that strong. But you want to look at like a very, very large set of data. So we can look at this tournament here, the St. Jude's VGC charity tournament, and then sort by that same win rate. I'm seeing, Snorlax looks strong. Gengar looks super strong. Lycanroc looks super strong. I mean, we know these Lycanroc teams, so we know this is still good. And usually what I'm looking at is the top 10%. So if we look at this Lycanroc again, I'm going to look at these three teams. I'm going to kind of ignore anything past that. Because if it didn't get past, like, the top 10%, then it's probably not that good of a build. And, it's all pretty much the same thing. So it's pretty easy to see what this thing is doing, and it's on a certain team, and that team is really successful in this tournament. And I'm like, wow, Eternal Flower Floette, 146 appearances, and it's winning 55% of the time, and it's getting 2nd, 5th, 9th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 18th. This thing looks stupid. Put it in Big 6. You can put it in a different variant, but it just looks dumb strong right now. You can even see Incineroar doing crazy work, Kingambit doing crazy work. And then there's also an alternative backwards way of looking at it. If you're struggling against Garchomps, the cool thing that you can do is you can go to matchups and say, okay, what is Garchomp actually losing to? So Garchomp is losing to Floette a lot and Gardevoir a lot. And it's not looking comfortable into Lycanroc teams either. But, you can kind of dedicate that to it being bad into Snow rather than be bad into Lycanroc, that specific Snow team. And it's bad into Talonflame. And it's doing bad into Mamoswine. And, the Frostlass is there as well. Kind of 45% is when you see Pokemon really be successful. So, like, it's not doing very well into Sneasler or Floette. So if you need a counter, you can go like, okay, what are people using here that's strong? Rotom Wash. You could probably run a Will-O-Wisp into it. That could be super strong. I'd only use it the larger data sets, but you can try the less data sets as well if you really, really like them. But those are the Pokemon that I see doing well into Charizard, into Garchomp. So that's how I kind of I think about data and data analysis. Try to look at recent data. If you get too far away, the meta's been changing a lot recently. Just because Champions meta just develops so fast. So it's important that you're really, really careful about what you do here. And then, like, since I was talking about that Staraptor earlier, so if we go back to share, it's got to be somewhat high. Staraptor here, 44%. So it was not very strong here. But what was going well? I see it next to Goldengo, and I see it next to Sinistra, and I see it next to Tyranitar once again. I see it on this this Big 6 type of build once again. I see it on this Sunroom variant again. So I'm noticing some basic rules about Staraptor. I'm noticing 3 teams it's successful on. It's successful with T-Tar Sand. It's successful with Big 6, and it's successful on this kind of Sunroom variant. And on the Sunroom variant, that's just Scarf, Gambit, Staraptor. So I would even ignore that if you're trying to build around Mega Staraptor. So I would see 2 variants here. I would say you build Big 6 Staraptor or you build T-Tar Staraptor. And that's going to be your best team variants for Staraptor. So that's how I kind of think about anti-meta and meta team building with statistics. If you use statistics, it helps a lot. You can also pull the top teams. This is really helpful for testing. If you look at this team, you might want to test against this or this or this. These are all good teams to test against because they're winning top end tournaments. And if they're winning top end tournaments, that means people are using these teams. There's a couple bigger ones that you might want to test against, but it's something to note for sure. So that's how I analyze data, and that's how I predict trends. Predicting trends goes down to like catching the little ones before they really become something. So like Lycanroc stocks are up, Gengar stocks are up a lot, especially with a 7 and an 8. But just generally, it looks really, really strong. Snorlax stocks, if we're talking about minor stocks, looks really good. It has 2 insane placements for something that only got used a little bit. So there's something about Snorlax that's super strong, especially with specifically Alolan Ninetales that I'm noting on this team, and Sneasler. So maybe that's a cord that's kind of coming out to exist, and maybe that could be very, very strong in this future. So yeah, that's how I think about looking at data analysis. I mean, even Lopunny could be decent, but it's about understanding what makes the Pokemon that good, not just, oh, that Pokemon is good because it's not up here because it's like the best Pokemon on every team, especially when they're tiny. It's that someone has figured out a very specific way of using this Pokemon that makes it really strong. And it's about, finding that really, really strong composition and building around it. So how does one test a team? Make sure you know your theories. You should have your calcs out, and you should understand how you're trying to deal with certain Pokemon. That helps so much in the certain matchups, because if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to be so much worse. But if you have your calculations not necessarily memorized, but generally, you're like, okay, I could pick this Pokemon because it needs to beat this Pokemon. That helps, especially in best of 3, because you can look at their team sheets. One of the things that I recommend doing, especially when you just have a team started out, initially with best of 6, use passers, which I've been talking about earlier, and then do a mock regionals in Showdown. Like, go to best of 3, play 8 matches, take your record there. If you make a day 2, play through that, etc., and just see how the team feels in like a full tournament of sorts. I mean, obviously, this is if you have the time, right? Not everybody has the time. But that would be a really good way to test a team and see how it feels and see how much you can climb. And if the team isn't feeling good, please go back to the drawing board, rebuild the team. Your team is never going to be perfect on its first go. Keep building your team over and over and over again. And be open-minded to alternative attempts. You're always trying to optimize your team for the Pokemon's purposes. And sometimes just because it's meta does not mean it's the best for that purpose. So be open-minded to alternative movesets. Be open-minded to alternative ideas that are like very smallly used. Just in general, be creative. Be creative with your team building. And by be creative, I mean be open-minded, because if you're just going to build slop, it's not going to be good because you're not going to intentionally build slop. And then, like, to help with that, get help from friends. If you're building a team that you really do care about, don't build a team by yourself. More minds is better on a team, and it'll have more ideas and more ways to deal with stuff. Though, if you're building the team for yourself, you don't always have to take advice. It's kind of, in a weird way, a way to think about writing. You should get help for editorial purposes, but if it messes with like who you are in your writing style, and in this case the green zone, it's gonna be worse for your team. So just because somebody else has a switch that's better for them doesn't mean it's better for you. But you have to try to differentiate between the two. And then if you're gonna do best of 3, and even best of 1, have one of your friends pilot some of the top teams in the meta and play matches against those teams. Understand the various ways you can attack their team and ways that they can attack your team. It's not necessarily going to be perfect, and you can't test against every Pokemon, but testing against top meta teams like Big 6 will help you understand what your answer to certain Pokemon are better and how you want to look at a line for a team. This is what I would do before regionals. This is what I've done for all of my regionals. Get help within your team building. Don't do it alone. Test your matchups. And do a mock regionals because it really helps you get in the mindset of a tournament mindset. It'll have your rating. You can see how much you jump with your rating and other stuff. Just generally a good way to approach building a team. And then, once again, iteration, iteration, iteration. Keep making iterations of the team until your tournament, until it feels perfect. If it doesn't feel perfect, keep iterating. Because there's always ways to improve a team. You can kind of use anything and make it work if you build it perfectly. You could look at the way like Wolfie builds teams. Like those teams are weird, and yet they always work because he optimizes, and he stays open-minded. So he's running things people won't run. And he's optimizing to make those Pokemon as effective at doing what they do as possible. Which is what always makes his team so successful every time, no matter what he plays. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I pilot best of 3 versus how I pilot best of 1. In best of 1, be conservative against your opponent. You will not know what they have. They can be running some wonky, cheesy shit. So don't commit yourself to like a game-winning opportunity immediately. You want to, have a more unpredictable team as well. Like start conservative, start really simple, like fake out, tailwind, get your speed control, like play passive. Because if they do something aggressive, you need to be able to respond, and you can't just lose a game immediately. And then another thing, just for team building, is having a more unpredictable team is very good for best of 1. Just playing straight Big 6 on ladder is fine, but it's just not the most effective way to play best of 1. Running weird techs for certain things, if you're intentional about it, can be really strong because people don't have a way of predicting those. And can really win games. A Pokemon that I really like using, especially if you flip common Pokemon on its head. If it's used in a certain way and you use it in not that certain way, you can catch them off guard. Like I built that fake Sun team for best of 1 because it looks like a Sun team on paper, but then when you get into a match, it's not a Sun team. It's not a Charizard team, as much as it looks like one. Or like something that I've been running is I've been running Final Gambit Mega Staraptor on my Trick Room teams, so it looks like a Mega Staraptor team, and they're going to play it like it's a Mega Staraptor team, and then I'm just going to blow the Mega Staraptor up and something else with it with Final Gambit. So one-off strategies work, right? So you can kind of run whatever in best of 1. Just have a purpose. Fun teams are better in best of 1. Weird teams are better in best of 1. But it also can be more frustrating because you can just deal with a bunch of weird stuff. And then here's how I think about leads. And I think that there's like 3 ways to do leads. There's the standard lead. Your team was built with a pair. So usually lead that pair. That's a really good and strong lead. Or if it's not, there's a problem with your team building. You should be able to lead the 2 Pokemon you built around and be completely fine. When you think about the back 2 of a standard pair, it's usually to help the standard just win it and finish the job. Your other 2, like your 3 and 4 Mons, can be really strong here, or depending on your team comp, 5 and 6 also work. It's if there's one problem Pokemon for your standard, having a Pokemon that can remove it, or just a good defensive backbone to let your standard Pokemon really take it home. It's like normally how people think about playing the game. But I think the next 2 are the most important. The counter is other teams will have a pair that's strong, or a couple Pokemon that can be really strong into your Pokemon. In that case, you don't want to bring your standard lead because it's just going to get destroyed if they bring those 2. So rather than bringing a standard team in situations like this, so like if you really struggle with Swampert and they have a Swampert, they're going to see that your team struggles against Swampert and they're going to bring it in the lead. But you should have answers to Swampert. So your counter lead is built on basically predicting exactly what their front 2 and their back 2 is going to look like. This is hard to do, but it's good to get in the habit of starting to predict people. because it hones your skills. And the more you can predict someone, the better you're going to play. So rather than, bringing your standard team, bring the 2 best Pokemon into what you think they're going to lead. And that's going to put a lot of early game pressure because you read their lead, which means you're going to start with a huge advantage. In the back 2, you have to fix what you don't have. Because, like, for example, into Mega Swampert teams that I had a struggle time with, a lot of the times I'll lead as a counter lead Sinistra. But, Sinistra isn't really going to do the damage that it needs to do. So for the back 2, you have to make sure that you're fixing the problems with your counter lead so that it's still, an acceptable team. So that it's like a good 4 that you can feel strong in. It just has a wonky lead set. So a lot of the times you can put your standard back here, or you can put your 5 and 6 as your alternative mode back here. There's a lot of things you can do with counter, but just make sure the team feels not like a complete counter team. And then a reverse is, in my opinion, the riskiest strategy, but the strongest strategy. And it's really good in best of 3s when you're up by 1 game, so going into game 2. If you really smashed them with your team last time and like a certain lead, you counter lead their counter lead. This is kind of like a counter, but rather than countering necessarily their strongest Pokemon, you're countering stuff like a Sinistra by leading like an Incineroar with Flare Blitz, which is a really weird set of Pokemon to bring, and you're risking that it's just not good into their standard build. But if you predict it right, then it puts them in a horrible situation because not only does their lead suck because it was a counter lead, but you have a good answer into their shitty lead, which just makes it even stronger. Same thing with the counter. You need to make sure your back 2 fix the front 2 issues so that you have a compatible team. But if you do that, that can like really get the jump on somebody. Those are the 3 common ways though. You do not have to always listen to this. It's not always that it has to be standard counter or reverse, but by applying standard counter or reverse, that can be really, really strong. Something that I think is important, because I don't think I have more slides on this. I should have wrote this down, but you have to figure out what type of player your opponent is, and that's kind of hard to do. But it's easier to do in best of 3, and you can tell by looking at their team sheet and looking at their leads and how they play. It helps to understand how they think about the game. So, like, do they have like a hyper offensive thought style of play? Do they lead their standard a lot? Do they try to lead counters a lot? And do they try to lead reverses a lot? Do they make really heavy predictions? Do they try to play more defensive? Do they play offensive? The better of a read you can get on that, like almost have like a scale in your mind and try to like scale them into a certain area in one game. Because if you're doing that and your opponent is not, it makes it significantly easier to predict people. And this kind of goes into my next thing. Work, even if you're not doing it, every single turn you play the game, especially when you have a team that you feel strong with, try to predict exactly what they're going to do. Predict their leads, predict their back, predict their moves. Don't necessarily counter for that situation. You can play standardly, like if you have fake out that's just strong in a given turn, you can say that slot is going to protect, but just fake out it anyways, just to play it safe. That's fine. Because, they're going to have a dead turn anyways. But the idea of predicting is it gives you a read on how you can get good at understanding how people think about the game. When you start to get to the point where you can read people like 50% of the time, you can make some really dangerous predictions, especially if you're behind, based on that base that you have, and can let you steal games away from players that you should not steal games away from. The person who told me this is like kind of a mediocre player, but he has beaten Wolfie Glick in a standard round before because he knows his playstyle, because he's watched his playstyle, and he predicted him like 4 turns in a row. And it was really super duper strong because he realized his move, what he was going to do, and how he thinks about the game. And then because he was already on the back foot, because it's Wolfie Glick, he made predictions. He just went raw prediction. based on how he knows he plays the game and based on the team that he has into his team. Um, which is just it's an absurd way of playing the game where if you get it right, you can win a game against literally anybody. If you predict them correctly. Um, what else was I going to talk about? I think that's a majority of what I was going to talk about in this session. It's not a lot, but I talked a little bit about battling and working on predicting with leads and predicting their moves. The more you predict, the more you just understand the game. It's about just comprehending the game more. If you're making predictions every single time, you can see how your thought process compares to their thought process. And it's thinking about them. If you start thinking like they think, then you're going to be so much better off if you can predict them turn by turn by turn by turn. It's one of my biggest weaknesses. I'm not very good at it, but it's very easily to be put on me because I'm very much a standard player. I like making the best move available. And in that case, there's kind of 3 ways to pilot a turn. There's the standard, which is like, there's like usually an obviously best move for you to make. Not always, but in a lot of cases you'll have generally where it's like, okay, a fake out into this Pokemon and then Trick Room here is just always going to let me get Trick Room and there's no way to punish this. That's standard. That's a standard way of thinking. And understanding if they think like a standard is important because that can make it really easy to predict. Where your second kind of way of thinking about a matchup is the counter to the standard. If you're countering their standard, then you're saying, okay, I predict that their best move is this, so I'm going to do the best move if they do that move. This is really helpful when you're on the back foot. And is usually important for getting back into games or, really running away with games. If you can predict right. It's usually not very good in neutral board states because in neutral you want to go standard until you can flip into a counter. But that can be really strong. And then the third one is the counter to the counter, which is if you have a standard move and you know what their response to a standard move would be, then you can make the counter to their response to your standard move. Which is a really long way of saying if you think they're going to get really good at predicting you, you can predict their prediction. And that's kind of how I think about that. There's kind of a fourth option that Wolfie's really good at, but I'm not good enough at this at all. I'm not good enough at battling yet to get to the point where I'm doing this. But they induce the counter and the standard, and they find a neutral route. Where even if they predict you perfectly, you're going to gain positive momentum. Like, there's no play for them to make where you don't gain momentum. Is what a perfect play is. And it's like the in-between play, where maybe you're not getting the max momentum, but you're always getting good momentum no matter what they do. That's really good to do when you're in the beginning of a best of 3. But I'm not going to necessarily ask for that for anyone working on this. So I would just base on standard and counter. Standard and counter is going to be the best way to play most games. Get good at work on your counter, play standard for most games, work on your counter, and then bring in counter if you feel like you're in a strong position, especially if you're in best of 3. In best of 1, counter doesn't really work. Because you don't have their team sheets and a variety of other things. So it is what it is. But that's what I have today. The quote unquote homework here, even though this is going to be the last of the session 2, is go play in a tournament. Go play in a best of 3 tournament and use this. Build a team with this in mind. Analyze data to get your team ready to go. Pick a Pokemon, pick a pair, add your fixer, your glue, play with that team a little bit, put it in passers, see what's an issue. Build your 5 and 6. Get good at trying to predict things and then just rip it at a tournament and see how you do. Tournaments are really fun, whether you do it online or an in-person one locally. And I mean, it's an enjoyable process. And it really gets you a read on thinking about the game, and what improvements you can make and what you struggled with and what went wrong. and then you can use that into the next team you build. And I mean, the only way you get better is by playing games. So just going into tournaments and doing this like again and again and again is just such a helpful process. So that's what I would recommend. If you have your 4, build your 6, get predictions, sign up for a tournament, and see how you do. Any kind of questions of sorts about what I was about like anything about team building or playing the game or
They might want some examples. I know that you've got some of my data and stuff over, just kind of show them what it looks like.
oh
Maybe that'll help.
you want to put your data out?
I don't have a problem with that. We can, if people have questions on like, is it really useful? Is it not useful? I think it'd be good to show them
Yeah. So this is
all that stuff because I've been finding it really useful. Honestly, been using it since the last session.
this is passers, which is what I was talking about, and this is informs listed stuff. Here's the Poke Paste. If you're wondering what his team looked like, it's a Staraptor Big Six team. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is one of the ways to use it. And then one of the biggest things is look at matchup stats and look at move usage. So when I go to matchup stats, I'm going to notice a couple things. Okay, we are struggling heavily into Farigiraf, we're struggling heavily into Incineroar, and we're struggling into Whimsicott. So I watched the games where he was losing here. And my conclusion that I came to was for a team that has Trick Room on his Whimsicott, he is tailwinding against another tailwinding Whimsicott way too often. So I was saying, all right, when you face Whimsicott teams, try to lean more into Trick Room. Trick Room can be really strong if they click Tailwind because it can do, so much things. And then Incineroar was an issue. Incineroar's been an issue because it beats Staraptor. That goes back to the counter lead. You have that Defiance King Gambit, which if they lead Incineroar, they're going to get punished by a Defiant boost, like really heavily. And that can be really, really strong at many points in the game. And then for Farigiraf, I've seen we're also losing here. We're losing to their Trick Room. So the issue is, when I was watching those games back, is we were leading Whimsicott too much into Trick Room, and we were never really leading King Gambit into it. And King Gambit punishes Intimidate, and it really can help blow up those Farigirafs with a Kowtow Cleave. And if they're trying to pivot into something like an Incineroar, they're getting punished. And if they're faking out, they're putting your King Gambit into its own Trick Room. And a well-positioned Whimsicott with your own Trick Room can flip those speed stats eventually. And they're giving you a Defiance boost to put you in that situation, which puts your King Gambit in a really strong spot. So I looked at his usage rates, and win percentages with different Pokemon, and that's where I kind of came to the conclusion. Whimsicott only ever came in the lead, ever, out of these 17 matches. All 17 it led, and it's the same win percentage. So it's about like mixing it up, right? We don't always want to lead Whimsicott because it's not necessarily the best way to lead. But this Charizard is just looking insane. 6 of 7 is a mega win percentage for Charizard. It looks like most of the games we're leading Charizard, we're winning. But now we're struggling really, really heavily with the Staraptor. So when I look at this team leaning into Charizard more, can help. Like be significantly stronger here. And maybe leaning a little less into Staraptor, especially Staraptor Whimsicott leads, because that hasn't always been the most successful. And then, leaning into playing King Gambit in a few more games, especially leading it, as well as, fixing what's going on here. It's very neutral, so it's about using these Pokemon a little bit better. And then I'm going to go to move usage to kind of take a look here. So this Garchomp is never clicked Protect. So when I see that, I'm thinking, okay, let's look at going more offensive. So when I look at the set again that's being run on this Garchomp, I'm seeing Expert Belt and Rock 2. If we're running this thing as offensive as it is, and we have Whimsicott with Tailwind and Trick Room, like, let's get rid of Rock 2. Let's put Rock Slide on it. Let's just have this be more of a threat. And let's steal this Life Orb from Vasty Legion. Because Garchomp is being way more offensive, so let's get it the more offensive item rather than the kind of, I'm not going to say questionable, but like the interesting item of Expert Belt. But, it's going to be really, really strong. It also helps to, look at the metagame again and see, like, what are other people using? Like, where is he? Garchomp, here he is. Like, let's see what the top builds are. Oh, this is a Life Orb set, running Rock Slide, Dragonclaw, Earthquake, Protect. Oh, this is a Life Orb set, running a very similar thing, except stomping Tantrum instead of Rock Slide. But we're using Rock Tomb enough, so I don't want to do that. Or here, this is a Garchomp Bite. We're just going to ignore that. That's not even real. Or, oh wait, I think I clicked on the same team again. Or this one, running another Life Orb, Rock Slide, Dragonclaw, Earthquake. So it's just easy to see that that moveset of Earthquake, Rock Slide, Dragonclaw with a Life Orb Garchomp is really, really popular right now. It looks correct on this Garchomp set. It lets it be more offensive since it doesn't like clicking Protect. And then we can switch this Basculegion set to not be Life Orb because it looks like this Basculegion is trying to play a little bit more defensively. So then you can think about, okay, what are alternative ways that people are using Basculegion in? And I'm going to look at this team, and this team is Mystic Water. So Mystic Water is a common option that we could go to. Or this one. This is Choice Scarf. That's another thing that we can think about just for offensive pressure. This one is a Citrus Berry. This one is also a Citrus Berry. So, like, when I look at this team, I'm like, okay, this thing wants a little bit more of a defensive backbone. It's clicking Protect a lot of the time, which means, we want to be a little bit more defensive with Spaskia Legion. So maybe we throw a Citrus Berry on it. Since we want to keep it low speed, since we're running the Trick Room, and this can be a Trick Room user. So we can really think like that. King Gambit seems to be effective doing what it does. And then I look at this Charizard. I see us not clicking Air Slash very often. And when I look at meta sets with the Charizard, I'm also not seeing it used very often. I'm seeing Weather Ball a lot. So I'd go, okay, the more meta pick here is Weather Ball rather than Air Slash. So since I'm not using it as much as I thought I might would, let's just flip it for Weather Ball to get that increased damage. And then when I'm looking at these other things, maybe we question Roost on Staraptor because we're not clicking that very often. Or he told me that he was having a lot of problems with the Wing Beat because he didn't like that it missed. So we can look at switching it to Brave Bird. Whimsicott. This thing is clicking Moonblast too much. 48% on a Whimsicott is just not strong. And I'm seeing us not click Trick Room very often. And once again, the King Gambit and the Basculegion have some very middling stats. So maybe we can try running a Trick Room variant more often with Basculegion and King Gambit and being more offensive there. And then even using Tickle with a Basculegion and King Gambit to boost Sucker Punch damage, or Aqua Jet, or Wave Crash damage to really, really just destroy things. And, maybe pivoting Whimsicott out more after you get your speed control up, because 48% clicking Moonblast is just not very strong. You want that to be doing other things. So that's how I look at improving teams through passers. I'm using a combination of data analysis and seeing what popular teams do, especially teams that are very similar to this type of team. So I'd be looking at Big Six a lot. And then since Protect is even a little low on King Gambit, you could look on running an alternative coverage move like a low kick as an option, and you could try that. So I kind of think like usually if your move is 15% or under, there's something going wrong. If you're not clicking a move 15% of the time, you should either look at removing it, or you should look at what's causing you to not click that move. And is it a move issue or a playstyle issue? So for this Whimsicott, Trick Room and Tickle, it's not a move problem, it's a usage problem. There's ways that we can use these moves that aren't being used. Trick Room is being used as a Trick Room alternative an alternative way to counter Trick Room, and Tickle is only really being used with Staraptor offensively and defensively. But we can play around with Tickle with any of these 4 Pokemon, like Garchomp, Charizard, Kingambit, Basculegion. Like King Gambit, Sucker Punch, Tickle does a 75% chance to OHKO on a Charizard. That's obscene amounts of damage. That's like not okay. That King Gambit can kill from that range with a Tickle. So we can use Tickles in situations like that. Or Tickle Last Respects kills everything. There's no chance anything takes a hit there. Or if there's a threat to Charizard that's a physical attacker, you can Tickle that down. And then Charizard will eat those hits. Or Garchomp, and then you click Earthquake next to it, and that thing still dies because the spread damage is just so strong. And then Trick Room, this team is a good team in Trick Room, and the team struggles against Whimsicott. Clicking Trick Room more often, like as an actual Trick Room team, could make this team stronger. or looking at switching out Protect, or using Protect more often on King Gambit. Thinking about that. Getting rid of Air Slash. Thinking about Protect on Charizard. You probably gotta have Protect on Charizard, just because it seems like it's such a no-duh move. But like, why aren't we clicking Protect on Charizard more? Probably because we have an 83% win percentage. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But like, why are we never clicking Protect on Garchomp? Do we want to remove that? Is that an issue? Same with the Charizard. The Protect on Staraptor, do we need to remove that? Roost on Staraptor, do we need to remove that? Like, how do we think about these things and how do we optimize them so that, like, in your pie chart, you're using every move more than 15% of the time? And this is where you're going to optimize your team a lot. Optimize your EV spreads and optimize your move sets so that it really, really feels strong into everything. So that you take this stats here from like these 40%, and you start boosting them to 65%. Like, I'm seeing use Charizard more, Garchomp's being used right, fix Basculegion some way. So we're gonna try Citrus Berry on this. We'll see if this is effective. Fix Staraptor. We can add Brave Bird for increased damage output. Maybe not always leading it next to Whimsicott, because that's not the most effective lead percentage. Maybe leading it with Garchomp more often. Leading into this, counter leading it, because a lot of people like leading Intimidate into Staraptor, and that's what's been so struggleful for Incineroar, leading King Gambit more often. Maybe even in that case, giving it low kick so that it can beat Incineroar with the low kick. So there are lots of ways to improve it, and make the team yours. If something's not working, it's usually because, not necessarily because a Pokemon is bad, though that can be the case. It's that it's not fitting your playstyle. So like Charizard really fits playstyle, and Garchomp feels good in this playstyle. And King Gambit's been good in this playstyle as well. And even Whimsicott's been feeling good. But like fixing how we use Whimsicott and fixing Basculegion as a more defensive counterpart has been shown statistically. And fixing Staraptor to not always lead Staraptor. These are like various ways to fix it. So that's how I think about looking at passers data and fixing it. And then if you're really just can't find a way to beat a Pokemon, then you might have to switch a 5 or 6 to beat that Pokemon specifically. Like giving a taunt to a Staraptor of sorts, so that you can always beat Trick Room. So that's how I think about looking at passers data. Questions from anybody? I'm seeing that being not the case. If we got nothing, no more comments on stuff to improve in, I can help you guys individually build teams. Just let me know what you're building, how you think about it. And let me know. I'm always down to help.